Hello, I am Dhanya Bhaskaran and today I am going to talk about learner autonomy. The term was coined in 1981 by the famous educationist Mr. Henry Hollick. By learner autonomy, we mean that we help the children to take autonomy of their own learning practices. Learner autonomy is a buzzword in the education scenario. Today, I am going to talk about how can we help children attain learner autonomy. What should we do in terms of teaching and learning that's happening within the educational system in this country. One of the most important things to achieve learner autonomy is to help the learner to go towards the responsibility taking role or to move towards taking the responsibility of learning. In that case, how can the teacher be responsible to help the child to attain learner autonomy? Let's look at it. There should be a series of paradigm shifts that should happen within the teaching learning system. Today, I'll be talking in detail about the key 7 paradigm shifts that must be part of the education system in India. Let's start exploring one by one. The first paradigm shift is from teaching the content to the process of learning. So far, we have been focusing on the content that gets transacted in the classroom. Well, that will definitely give way to a lot more of rote learning. Learning more and more of facts and figures. That's not what is required in the 21st century according to National Education Policy 2020. To develop a knowledge society, to develop a learner who is in control of his or her own learning, we need to transfer the learner's role. We need to transfer the style and the process that's happening in the classroom to a more dynamic and constructive one. Instead of focusing on the content transaction, the teachers should now focus on the process of learning itself. The product or the end product matters less than the holistic process itself. The holistic process of learning, when the focus is falling on the holistic process of learning, the learner's role gets highlighted because here the doer is the learner. And that way, the learner will get more room to construct knowledge than remain as a receiver, a passive receiver of knowledge. When the learner is an active constructor of knowledge, and when the focus is on the process of this construction of knowledge, naturally there will be a lesser focus on rote learning and by hearting. So that is the first paradigm shift that should happen in the education scenario. The second one is a shift from the craft model to the reflective model of learning to teach. Well, here I am talking about the teachers who learn how to teach. Instead of copying what the teacher trainers are doing in the teaching practice lessons, we must now think about what works well in one's classroom and what would have done better. That means the teacher trainee will be now thinking about what is right and most suitable for his or her own individual classroom. So, instead of following a set of general rules, they will be designing and developing their own teaching practices. Thus, there will be a transfer from the craft model of teacher education to the reflective model of teaching. The third focus shift is a much discussed one, and it has been in discussion for a while now, which is from the teacher centric to the learner centric classroom. Well, as long as the teacher is standing and the students are sitting, it's not easy to achieve it. We need to shift the teacher's role tremendously, and for that, the teacher's classroom design also should undergo a sea change. Instead of a Hitler standing and ordering and giving commands, there should be a system where there will be multiple voices that will be heard and that will be listened to. The school or the classroom should provide a fear-free environment where the children will be able to share their experiences, their expectations, and their learning. The role of a teacher will naturally be that of a facilitator in that kind of a classroom. There should be a lot of activities which the teacher and students together collaboratively design that will suit the learning needs of the learner, and that will also take into account the end result or the product. The teacher should be in a position to provide multiple learning opportunities that will suit different types of learners and learning styles that are existing within the learners. A multitude of learning experiences will ensure that the learner get an opportunity to take the best out of the choices given to him or her. Thus, the teacher will be able to transfer the responsibility of teaching and learning from him or her to his or her learners. The fourth focus shift is from teaching to co-creation. Instead of remaining as a passive teacher, if the teacher could transform herself as an active creator, then this shift will be a reality in our classrooms. And she should not only be a creator, she should be a co-creator who will inspire the students to create along with her. It's not an easy job. This requires a lot of patience, planning, and execution strategies in place. There are different resources available for us which will help the teacher to take over this new role, that of a co-creator. In a co-creator's role, the teacher will remain a curious student. What is best than being a student in a learning environment? That's how we can practice what we preach. So, inviting oneself into the role of a co-creator will bring a lot of benefits to the teacher as well, because ultimately that's going to help the teacher to invoke the child within. The next paradigm shift is from a teacher to a researcher. If the teacher can model himself or herself as a researcher, nothing better than that. Because if we have to help the children to be responsible for their own learning, it is important that our children know how to take care of their own learning, how to do their own learning, how to research, how to seek, how to find out. Instead of remaining as a passive listener, when we help them to be seekers, then the learner autonomy becomes an easy target to achieve. For that, first the teacher should get prepared for that. Thus, when the teacher develops herself as a researcher or a scholar, then it's easy to bring in learner autonomy as a reality. The next paradigm shift is from book-oriented learning to experiential learning. I have heard somebody saying that we should burn the books. Of course, we must do that. The books are not the final word. In fact, the books are just one among the multitude of teaching learning materials available for the students. They are just a starting point. Instead of sticking within the limits of the book, if the teacher can take the child to a bigger world by providing multiple learning experiences, that will have a meaningful learning, that will help the child to attain meaningful learning. and it will naturally have a knock-on effect on the impact of learning in the child. When the child experiences what it's being conveyed to him, it will be part of a long-term memory. Instead of rote learning, or instead of learning just with the help of books, when the learner is moving towards experiential learning, the focus is on the learner, and the learner will be the key person in the learning process. Group learning activities, multiple group learning activities usually provide a lot of experiential learning opportunities. A teacher will have to do some preparations to make an effective experiential learning program in the class, but there are resources available around. Seek it. Seek them, you will find it. The moment you make your classroom an experiential one, that's going to be the best learning practice that you can provide for the child. All that need is a little bit of preparation. The final paradigm shift, the seventh one, it is from rote learning to conceptual learning. Instead of mugging up facts, when we help the child to understand the concept in detail, that is going to be there in the child's life forever. Otherwise, we will memorize all those rote learnt content. Shall we learn the concept? I am not sure so. Conceptual learning demands an effective involvement of the learner in the learning process. I have been talking about 7 paradigm shifts that should be part of our classrooms. These 7 paradigm shifts will help the learner to attain learner autonomy. To gain control over one's own learning process is very important to create a lifelong learner. Otherwise, the child's journey through learning will stop when he or she finishes their school or college education. In 21st century, we cannot survive without continuing as a learner. We cannot stagnate. We cannot stay in a place still. To instill the spirit of learning and to keep it continuing within requires a lot of support from the teachers. So, dear teachers, a humble urge from a fellow teacher. Please help your students to take responsibility of learning. They can't do it on their own. They need your help, your support, and constant encouragement. Help them to be autonomous. Help them to be lifelong learners. Thank you.